Hello everybody, this is Aaron Dean, and head teacher at Learning Through Games, owner of Learning Through Games, and executive director of Learning Through Chess, our nonprofit division. And here we're going to look at number 8 of our top 30 checkmates of all time. But before we get into that, I did get a message from one of my students that said, Mr. Dean, what are you going to do after the top 30 checkmates of all time? What comes next? And that's already been planned. In fact, it's already almost completely done. I'm kind of doing some finishing touches, but that is the top 30 of my favorite chess players of all time. And that could include all-time greats that everybody knows. It could include lesser-known grandmasters. It could include local Indiana favorites. It could include mainly people that not many people know. Maybe I know. And everybody, it could include anybody. So it's really interesting, I'll say. I've been looking through my picks and maneuvering them, so I can't wait to get started on that, hopefully pretty soon. So let's take a look at the match today between these two. Alexander Alekhine, former world champion. I think there were a couple occasions where he lost the title and came back. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. And Peter Potemkin, I believe. It was somebody I really had never heard of. I had known this game, but I didn't even remember exactly who played it. I'm sure he was a great player at the time, but of course nothing like a world champion Alexander Alekhine. Or Alekhine. I'm probably not even pronouncing that right. All right, so let's take a look at this great game here. And starts out a Sicilian, and let's go ahead and switch it so we can see the black side. And this is also unusual that this is one of the few games on the list where black is the winner. It's usually white that gets these great checkmates because white has the advantage of starting first. Now it's almost starting to look like this could transpose into something called the King's Indian attack. Now, King's Indian attack could be something like where white fianchettos, brings the knight here, plays this pawn here, brings the other knight to d2. But it doesn't quite get to be like that. Bishop fianchettos, black fianchettos the bishops, and remember kids, a fianchetto is when you put the bishop on that long diagonal. This could also be fianchettoed if you brought the bishop on that diagonal too. Knight to e2, knight to c6. Black's doing some good control of the dark squares, as you see. c3. Now this move, it looks like white wants to play d4, get some control of d4. He doesn't have enough support yet to do it, although he could have done it earlier in the game. Probably... Oh, not there, I guess. Well, I guess he could have done it earlier had he had knight f3 earlier. He could play it right here, but then he'd have to bring his queen out. And he probably wouldn't want to do that and get threatened, although it does have a threat, so maybe not right away. And, yeah, I guess you could fianchetto here. Okay, so in the game, pawn c3 was played, knight f6 by Alexander Alekhine, and knight a3. Kind of an unusual move to move the knight to the side, and now black is the one who takes control of the center. So let's see if you can pause the video and if you can find a way black can get some center control right here. Okay, if you chose pawn to d5, you were correct. And usually if black gets to be the one to open up the center first, things are looking pretty good for black, because generally white gets that chance easier because he moves first. Pawn takes, knight takes. He doesn't want to take with the queen, of course, because bishop would take the queen. Knight c2. Go ahead and pause the video and tell me what you think white's purpose of playing knight c2 was. Okay, if you thought it was supporting d4, yes, that's the main purpose. Maybe he saw some way he could come out here later in the game and have more options for the knight than on the side. That's true too. So after that, black castles. And then just like we thought, white opens up the center with d4. Pawn takes d4, pawn takes back. And already you see black has some good center control. He has a good light squared bishop, a good dark squared bishop. And he's more developed than white. White has not castled. One of white's minors has not moved out. And for black, just one of his minors, but he has castled. And black moves second. So black, I think, is doing pretty good already here. What do you think is a good move for black to keep the initiative, keep the push on white in this position? Pause the video if you need to. All right. If you thought bishop g4 was that move, yeah, that's pressuring this. I think it's a very good move to play bishop g4. It's developing, now it allows your rook to come out. Bishop g4, if you put on the computer now, the computer actually likes bishop e6 also. Pretty similar. So it doesn't look like it has quite the same punch as bishop g4, but still probably as good. So after bishop g4, f3 was played. But notice how f3 weakens this in here quite a bit. The better move, perhaps, maybe just castling now, would have been a little bit better for white without creating as many weaknesses, although black probably still better, has better piece mobility. So what happened was pawn f3, bishop backs up, and knight e3. What do you think is a good move here? Because the world champion actually played a move that, brought another piece into the game to attack sort of in another area. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, if you thought queen a5 was it, you are correct. Queen a5 check. And the obvious looking move, the move that just it seems like you would play, natural move here, is actually not so good because of this move. Knight takes, threatening the queen. And notice how the bishop can't take the knight. So they could take the queen here, but then this turns out very good for black. Black wins material. So because of that, after the check, white moved in here. Now what I really like about this game is it's quick and there's just a lot of things going on in different parts of the board. It may not be the most complicated of all the checkmates, but I like those two things about it. So after that, king f2, knight comes here. So knight looking to maybe check in here, cause some damage. After knight, knight takes f5, queen takes back. This check still could happen. Pawn to g4. What do you think is a good move here? Pause the video if you need to. Okay, if you thought just moving the queen back and being safe, no, not quite the good move. Although, this might be okay. Moving the queen, still pressuring that check with the knight, and guarding, not that the knight needed guarding, but, keeping that pressure on the d3 square. That still looks pretty good. But also, if you chose knight d3, you were correct. You don't need to move the queen right now. You can check the king. But you have to think, okay, after they move, where can my queen go? Well, Alexander, before this was even played, realized he didn't need to worry about where the queen could go. Now, the queen could go here and protect the knight, but he didn't have to protect the knight because he actually saw a checkmate coming up here. Can you see the best move? It's not necessarily a forced checkmate, but it will lead to a checkmate if the sacrifice happens. And remember, kids, sacrifice is when you sacrifice or you give up material, usually, for something better, mainly checkmate, or perhaps getting more material back later. Okay, if you said knight d4, you're pretty awesome to find that. I don't think I would have found that in a game unless somebody said, oh, there's a great move here, and then I might say, oh, well. After that, knight takes d4, pawn takes knight, check, king goes to g4, check. Now there's a couple options here, but the move they played was king here to h3, and what is that final move, guys? The final checkmating move. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, if you said knight f2, you were correct. What an awesome checkmate that led to. Now there were other options he had. After h5, for example, well, it could have, oh, you can't play there. You could maybe go here, and what's the move here that leads to checkmate? Well, you got checkmate or checkmate. Either of those are pretty good. What other options? So if we go back, we had queen g4 is what was played here, but what if they just play king to h3 right away? Well, then you get the same checkmate. So all this Alexander saw probably right before knight takes d4, maybe even before that, who knows. And he made quite an outstanding checkmate. The final knight f2. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed number 8. This was all the way back from 1912. Next, probably tomorrow, we're going to do number 7 of the greatest checkmates of all time. We will see you then.